I'm here with Bill Moore today, and Bill has been a friend of ours for many years.
Well, thanks for having me, you two. I really appreciate it. Let's start. How long have you two been married, Cindy?
17 years.
17. We're
Yeah.
sure about that, right? Sometimes she forgets, but
Yep,
that's quite
17.
a while.
20 years together.
How long after you were married did she talk to you about the abuse from her childhood?
Actually, Cindy told me shortly after we started dating, probably 2 months in.
So very quickly.
Very quickly, yeah.
What compelled you to bring that forward so soon?
I felt that I had to be as honest as I could so that he knew everything about me, and I didn't want to leave any surprises, any skeletons in the closet.
How did you react when Cindy first told you?
I was shocked and angry with her father. Once I got past that, I realized Cindy was the victim in this, and being angry at her father wasn't productive, and I wanted to be supportive to her and listen to her story.
Did you feel there was any emotional damage? Feel any trepidation about being involved with Cindy after learning about this?
None at all. Everything I'd seen up to that point, I fell in love with, and when she told me about what happened to her, it didn't change my opinion at all.
Did you feel as though her history might show up sometime in the relationship? Was there any reason to date for 2 years, or was that a concern of yours at all?
No, we were blending a family with young kids, and both of us came out of somewhat difficult divorces, and we just needed some time, but there was never any signs of trouble that I had seen. I wasn't looking for trouble either. I fell in love with her shortly after we met, and nothing she was going to say or do would change that.
Did you have any reservations about this because of bringing children together?
No, Cindy had very good boundaries with her father,
Okay.
and he was living outside the state at the time and didn't come to Seattle very often at all. And even when he did, I knew that the children would always be safe. I only knew her dad as an older gentleman. All this abuse took place many, many years ago when Cindy was very young, so I really only knew him as an old man.
And how old were the kids when you guys first met?
Brian was 6.
So we had 11, 10, 8, and 6.
So young.
Really young.
Yeah.
Really young. So did you have any issues with that? Or any reservations about blending the families with the history in the background?
Yeah, I did. Even though I had these boundaries, I was still very concerned. But Mark was pretty understanding, and he always took my lead. It was tough because I wanted to tell the children, but I didn't feel it was appropriate because they were too young. So I really had to kind of live by a code, or like a moral code of what I felt was right at that time.
Did you ever tell them finally?
Eventually, when they were older, and they were all at different ages and stages.
Did you guys do that together, or?
No, that was my decision, yeah. Although you were really open to it. Yeah.
And you didn't have any problems without any? It was just that was the path you wanted to take with Cindy?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt it was her decision when she wanted to talk to the kids and tell them, and our concern was that we didn't want the children to deal with their grandfather any differently than they had in the past.
Cindy, when did you feel healthy enough to have a relationship? How long did it take?
Well, I've kind of had a lifetime of therapy, and it's been a process. And I knew through time and through dating that if I really wanted to get it right, that I needed to do the work involved to get it right.
When you say a lifetime, was
15, 18 years.
so quite a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And how would you say that's helped her?
Cindy's already a very open person, and definitely I believe the therapy helped her work through all the emotions, and it also helped me understand the emotions that she was dealing with. I literally felt it was my job to mirror however she dealt with her father.
Did you guys communicate that to each other, or was that just the way the relationship evolved?
Early on.
Like our first conversation, like our very first conversation, I was a little tentative in telling him because I didn't know I really liked him, and I didn't want to lose him, and I really liked him. But I thought, no, I just got to lay my cards on the table and just tell him now and see what his reaction is or how he's going to handle this, and then he can move on or I can move on, and let's just go with it. And so when he did tell me, or when I told him, he asked a lot of really annoying questions like, well, how did you know? And well, I told him it was a flashback or a repressed memory, and he's like, well, how could you know from a dream? And he was really questioning me, and they were good questions, but I was still annoyed nevertheless. After I told him, he even told me a story about another family member and how he even doubted her, because how do you believe somebody, and what's reality and what's not reality, and that kind of bugged me too, that he didn't believe her. But through the whole thing, he just kind of paused, and I thought this was like the pivotal part of where I knew he was for me. He said, you know what? He was silent for a while, and he goes, I'm going to take your lead on this. I'm just going to take your lead on this.
Situation with a family member happened before I had met Cindy, and I learned a little through that process. I thought, and I do think that the first inclination is not to be the judge, jury, and executioner immediately. I had never really been through this process before my family member had that happen to them. And I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I had a lot of questions. I'm not a psychologist. It's a balancing act. I wanted to be supportive, but I also wanted to understand why these thoughts would be repressed for so long and how they came out. I think it's important to be fair not only to the victim but also to the accused.
That's a healthy perspective, and it's you know, that is to me a very fine line in these sorts of situations that arise, because we're not psychologists. Well, we don't know.
And this is currently going on with like the Me Too movement and the whole thing about judge and jury and all the whole thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that really applies.
Well, it is important not to hang somebody as soon as you hear a story. I feel like in any capacity in life, whether it's this or in business, I've got two people telling me two completely different stories, and I have to be the arbiter and figure out which one I choose to believe. And of course, clearly when Cindy told me, I didn't disbelieve her, but I had a lot of questions about the process on how she got there. And again, it wasn't my decision to go ahead and be really angry with her father. I wanted to mirror however she was reacting to her dad. So I didn't go, I was mad, but he never saw that. I was angry with him at any time during our relationship.
So I know that I would be, I would have, this would be a very private thing for me. I want to keep it quiet from people and family and friends. How did you decide to, when it was right to talk with your family, and how did you decide to broach the subject with them?
It was definitely, in my opinion, Cindy's decision about when she wanted to tell the family and our friends. And again, being a good soldier, I was going to take the lead on that. I wasn't embarrassed by it at all. Cindy was the victim, though she wasn't looking for sympathy. I think she felt it was time to tell her story. And when did you decide, and why?
With regards to the kids, and sharing my story openly after I shared my story with the kids, they were just amazed, like, Mom, I didn't know this about you. I had no idea that you had this history. And I was touched, kind of scared in the fact that they didn't know anything that happened. I think it put a lot of things in perspective why I had such a strained relationship with my father. And I think it was like an aha moment with them. And after that, I started interacting with my father because I moved him up here. And through the course of that, it just evolved. And I thought, you know what, we need to talk about sexual abuse in families and relationships and how often this occurs. And so that's where I went.
So you moved your father up here, and you put him into a nice nursing home at that time,
Yeah.
in the area here. Mark, how did that make you feel? Did you feel resentful or anything like that, bringing up a father who had abused Cindy sexually and basically taking care of him up here?
Yeah, I didn't have really any mixed emotions. I always treated him with respect and as a father-in-law because that's what Cindy wanted me to do. And I kept my emotions in check, and I did what I thought was the right thing, to be supportive to Cindy and also to be supportive to an elder who's my wife's father, regardless of my feelings.
Cindy, when did you decide to forgive your father?
That's kind of a heavy question with lots of different layers. I don't know if it was a time. I think forgiveness is a process. I think it comes in stages. You could still be angry and forgive. So it really wasn't a time. It was like a frame of years.
And have you been, did this time pass for more than a decade? I mean, has it been more than a decade since you've forgiven, perhaps is the wrong word, but before bringing him up here, it would have been quite a period of time? Or was bringing him up here part of the catharsis of the relationship?
No, I think I dealt with this. This doesn't define me. This was something in the past, and I think in my teenage years, I went through this process.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot of hard work for a young girl, isn't it? We're commended to on that. So, Mark, do you and Cindy ever fight about your father-in-law?
Not at all, ever.
No.
Like I said, I completely mirror her actions. And she's treated him at times more distant and at times more close, but always treated him like a father, with a little baggage, let's just say.
Yeah,
it hasn't been 100%. I would say the way that, for instance, that my sister is with my father, but she still gave him all the respect and love that at least outwardly a daughter would give to her father, which made him happy.
Okay. Yeah.
Seemed like the right thing.
Well, how would you then say the abuse has most affected your marriage?
I think it established a very open line of communication right from the beginning with Cindy and I, where we could talk about virtually anything.
Yeah, like brutally honest.
Brutally honest.
Yeah.
So, Mark, what would you give? What kind of advice would you give to others who've experienced or entering a relationship with somebody who has experienced sexual abuse?
Ask questions, be open, be supportive, and you can have a completely highly functioning relationship with somebody that's been abused. Keep in mind that they're the abused, they're the victim.
And how should we, as a society, approach sexual abuse in relationships as we move forward? What are some of the things we can do?
I think it's important for the victims to be able to freely speak out with no judgment placed on them, and to have an open conversation about what happened to them. Communication.
And just as a last question here then, Mark, what do you think has helped Cindy the most in her healing?
I think it's a combination of a very resilient spirit, and a loving human being, combined with a lot of therapy to continue to improve herself, and feeling free to also drag all the rest of us into therapy as well with her.
Have you gone into some sessions?
Cindy and I had sessions prior to our marriage. It wasn't relative to her abuse, and she also had all of our kids go into therapy before we got married as well. Okay. And if we had dogs then, they probably also would have been in therapy.
And in terms of what's helped you the most in healing, what would you say?
I think Mark has been a huge source of strength for me. I think communication is the key to my success. Therapy, and I also have a strong faith that has really helped me carry through.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for letting me sit down and talk with you for a little bit.